What's up, guys? So we're back again, another video. I'm excited for this one. This is like the one I've been looking forward to this whole time. This is by far my favorite story of all the stories that I've told so far. Super intense, super crazy. Unfortunately though, for you guys, it is about aliens. I'm sorry, I know I'm going down a rabbit hole that I can never crawl out of, but we're going down it together, and maybe one day we can climb our way out and find something else to talk about. I'm just kidding. This is definitely the last video about aliens that I'm going to talk about for at least a week or two. I'm going to try to make some videos about, you know, daily life in New York and maybe some other things. If you guys have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. But for now, we're talking about aliens. We're talking about one of the craziest mass sightings in UFO history. It happened at a school in Australia. Over 200 people saw it. My favorite case of all time. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I covered this topic in one of my earlier videos very briefly, but this time I'm going to go into detail about it. It's the UFO sighting in Australia that I mentioned in my second video on the channel, but my first UFO video. I just kind of talked about it very briefly. A bunch of kids at the school saw it, essentially. But today I wanted to go into a little bit of detail about what they saw, all the crazy stuff that happened afterwards, and just kind of give you guys a rundown of everything because it's super interesting. Outside of them just seeing some stuff, a lot of other crazy stuff went down. So yeah, let's rewind ourselves back to 1966. Okay, it's the roaring 60s. Everybody's doing all the gold mining, and you know, the World War II is happening. All the crazy things are happening in the world, and this just happens to be happening at the same time. If you know about history like I do, you know that, like, you know, a lot of stuff was happening around this time. America was just getting founded. They were sailing across on the Mayflower a couple of years after this. This was a crazy time. It happened inside of Melbourne, Australia, which, if you don't know anything about Australia, is one of the bigger cities in Australia. So we're there, we're in 1966. Now, the place where this took place wasn't just one school. It was actually two schools. So it was a primary school and a secondary school. And they were kind of close to each other. You know how, like, a lot of times in America, I don't know if you guys are from America or not, but I'm from America. In America, they usually put the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school all very close to each other. Well, the primary school would be the elementary school, and then the secondary school would be similar to like a middle school or a high school. So these two schools were very close to each other. They were, you know, within a mile or two from each other. And close to these two schools, there was this area called the Grange. And so it was set up like this: secondary school, and then a couple miles away or within a mile or two, I'm not sure, primary school, Grange. So the primary school was the closest thing to the Grange, and the Grange was like this park where the kids would kind of sneak off to and hang out. It was kind of like this wilderness area near the schools that didn't really have any housing or anything. It was just kind of like this open wilderness, and a lot of the kids would sneak over there and hang out during recess or whatever. And so that was on the other side of the primary school. So secondary school, primary school, Grange. So it's the 6th of April, 1966, around 11 a.m. and these kids are in school. Both schools are in session. So it's around some time that some kids from the secondary school, so like the older kids, they look up in the sky, and some of the teachers as well, look up in the sky and they see this saucer flying in the sky over the school. And so all the kids kind of like rush to the window. They're staring out the window, wondering what's going on. The teachers are trying to get them back together, get them to calm down. So this saucer flies over the secondary school and towards the primary school. And so the people at the secondary school are watching it fly towards the primary school, and it's around this time that the people at the primary school start seeing it as well. So it goes over the secondary school, over the primary school, and then starts heading towards the Grange. Now, if you saw my last video, there was a very similar area in the Zimbabwe case where there was a little wooded area beside of the playground, and that's where the UFO landed, was right beside of where the kids would be playing. It's very similar to the Grange, which is also like a wooded area where the kids technically weren't allowed, but they always snuck off to during their free time. So the UFO kind of starts flying over both of the schools and goes towards the Grange, which is on the other side of the primary school. Starts like lowering, kind of hovering above the Grange. So a lot of the kids at the primary school, the younger kids now, they start running towards the Grange where they see this craft, right? Because it's kind of lowering itself into the Grange, it looks like. And a lot of the kids start freaking out. They run inside and they start screaming and crying and telling the teacher, oh my gosh, you know, there's something in the sky, something's going on.
I was actually in science class and we had a student had rung in and flung the door open and said, "Mr. Greenwood, there's things in the sky, there's flying saucers in the sky." So we all ran down the corridor and out onto the oval, and yes, there were flying saucers in the sky. I saw 3 of them.
And so a bunch of the kids rush outside, a bunch of the kids rush inside. There's kind of panic going on. The teachers are trying to get everything under control. One of the teachers is trying to get all his students to sit down, to calm down. But unfortunately for him, the bell goes off just a couple of seconds later, and all the kids rush outside. So at this point, all the kids are starting to rush out. You know, besides a couple stragglers who are scared, are starting to rush out to the Grange to try to see what's going on. So this is where it starts to get crazy. A woman named Barbara Roberts, who is a chemistry teacher, she has a camera with her. So she starts snapping photos at the windows because she's witnessing this as well. She's freaking out. She's snapping photos outside of the craft, wondering like, what's going on? What is this thing? This is a craft. It's a craft, and that's a craft. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, there's this other guy, another teacher, and we all know someone like this. He uses this opportunity of everybody being distracted for him to go sneak off and have a cigarette break. So he's like inside. You know, they used to be able to smoke inside back then. He's like inside smoking a cigarette, chilling. He walks back out a couple minutes later, and one of the other teachers comes up to him. And this teacher will come into play later on. His name is Andrew Greenwood, and he is another science teacher at the primary school. He comes up to the guy that was smoking the cigarette, and he goes, "Joe, did you see that? Did you see that? That was crazy, the crap." And he starts describing everything to the guy that was smoking the cigarette. And the guy that was smoking the cigarette was just like, "Oh man, I was inside chilling, smoking a cigarette, dude. Tell me all about it." You know what I mean? Really cool guy.
I see Andrew Greenwood, the science teacher, coming towards me, and he said, "Did you see it? Did you see it?" And he pointed up in the air, and I said, "No, see what?" I have a very, very clear picture of him, and I remember almost exactly what he said. And he said it was up in the sky, it moved at incredible speeds, it hovered, it seemed to go away, and there seemed to be light planes. He thought Cessnas he thought they were actually checking it out from the Roman airport. Yeah. And they were circling around it.
So he starts telling this guy that's smoking the cigarette about how fast it was moving, how it was the craziest thing he's ever seen, how there seemed to be other aircraft like circling it, but he couldn't really tell like what they were. Now, it wasn't just the students and the teachers at the school that were seeing these UFOs flying around at this time. There were reports all around Melbourne that day of people seeing it, and of it landing in different places besides the one we're going to talk about today. But we'll get back to that. So, cut to the Grange. This craft is landing in the Grange. The kids are watching. They're trying to get to where the craft is landing. It kind of goes deep into the Grange, so the kids are having to like dash through all this foresty area to try and get to where the craft is. One of the students is leading the way, leading the charge, leading the battle. You know, she wants to get there first, and she will get there first. And what happens to her might not be worth getting there first. That's all I have to say. So her name is Tanya. Tanya's leading the charge. She has another friend with her who is kind of following close behind, but Tanya is fast, and Tanya is booking it, bro. Like, she is the Usain Bolt of the school. She is running as fast as she can. Now, the other girl who was following behind her, we'll get to see a little bit of interviews from her. I'll play some of those later. She'll kind of describe what she saw and how it happened and whatnot. But Tanya, unfortunately, we don't have any interviews of, and you'll know why here in a little bit. Now, the girl behind Tanya, her name was Jacqueline. So Jacqueline wasn't able to make it to the craft in time to see it on the ground. But as she was getting to where it was landed at, because she was trying to find where it was landed, you know, it's a super wooded area. It was probably really hard to tell what was going on and where it had landed. But as she's getting close to where it had landed, she sees it kind of lift above the trees. So she's looking up, she can see it lift above the trees in front of her, and it lifts up, shoots up into the sky, gone, right?
It just raised up above me, probably to about 12 feet, turned on its side and went zoom straight up into the air and disappeared almost instantly. And there were 2 other craft in the air at the time.
It goes straight up like this, turns on the side, and shoots up into the sky, which is a super common description of how people describe these crafts lifting up, back up into the sky, back up into space, or wherever they go, back into their super secret world, like the hidden world in Black Panther. I don't know. They go somewhere. So after Jacqueline sees this thing kind of lift up, turn, go straight up. Tanya comes running from the forest at her, and Tanya is hysterical. Tanya is freaking out, dude. Like, she is having a bad time.
I saw a flying saucer. I don't recall there being more than one, but we were down the back. I was down the back of the oval with Tanya when we noticed it in the sky. It did some manoeuvres which were very strange, which is why our attention was drawn to it in the first place. And then it came down over the Grange. We could see it coming down, so we took off after it. Tanya actually reached the craft, I believe. I didn't, because she came back screaming towards me, and then I ran back with her to the school. She got taken away in an ambulance, and that was the last time I saw her.
So Jacqueline leads her back to the school. They go back to the school together. Tanya's freaking out. Jacqueline guides her back to the school. They get back to the school, and when they get back, there is a ambulance called for Tanya. And Tanya is taken away in the ambulance to the hospital because I guess she was so hysterical, she needed medical care. I'm not really sure exactly what happened there, but that's all they say. She was hysterical, she was freaking out, and they had to call an ambulance, and she was picked up and taken to the hospital. Now this is where it gets crazy, and this is kind of where the story dives off to the side a little bit, because Tanya is never seen again by any of her friends, by anyone at the school. She never comes to school again, nothing. This is kind of the part that makes this story the most interesting for me, because there is kind of this mystery around, and nobody who talks about this case ever talks about Tanya. It's one of those things that's kind of like brushed over, like, oh yeah, this girl just disappeared and nobody ever talked about her again, or nobody ever saw her again. But I think that there's a real mystery here, and honestly, I'm surprised that it hasn't been on Unsolved Mysteries. I'm surprised that we haven't heard more about this case before, because the Tanya case alone, the Tanya aspect of this case, in my opinion, is the most interesting part. Where is Tanya? What happened to her? Now, what I'm about to tell you is going to make you go, what the heck, man? You know, you're about to be like, what the heck, man? You know, you're going to be like puffing out your chest, flexing your muscles, like, what the heck, man? Like, you're going to be ready to go, dude, because what I'm about to tell you is going to blow your mind, all right? So, one of her classmates and best friends, so a girl that has gone to Tanya's place over multiple times, they're really close friends. She used to go visit her all the time. They would hang out at Tanya's place. She goes over a day or two later, I think it was the next day, the next day. She goes over the next day to check on Tanya to see how she's doing. So when she knocks on the door, there was a English family there. So like a family from the UK that speaks like, you know, British English, so, you know, not Australian English. So they speak with a British accent as opposed to an Australian accent. And she doesn't recognize these people. She's never seen these people before. And they tell her that Tanya has never lived there. They don't know who Tanya is. They've never seen anyone or heard of anyone named Tanya. So she leaves, and they are completely unable to find Tanya ever again. She never talks to her friend again. Now remember, this happened in 1966. There are interviews of this woman, a grown woman who was Tanya's friend, talking about this today. She still has never heard from her friend again, never seen her again, doesn't know what happened to her. Nobody knows what happened to her.
Can I ask what happened to the girl? You took her back to the school, the one that was hysterical. Is it Tanya? And she went into the hospital, and then you went to visit her at her place, and they said she didn't live there.
That's
yes,
right.
I went to her house the following day, and an English-speaking woman opened the door and said there had never been a Tanya living there. Now the problem with that is that Tanya's parents didn't speak English to start with. I think they were Yugoslavian. So I'd been to this house a lot of times and then was told, no, sorry, you're mistaken.
Oh my God.
So this mystery behind what happened to her is kind of layered in all these crazy things that I'm about to tell you. So there's a deeper mystery here that I think by the end of this video you might have an idea of like what might have happened. But my theory is that Tanya was taken, that Tanya was trying to tell people what she saw, or something happened to her near that craft. She saw something she wasn't supposed to see. When she was taken to the hospital, people interviewed her. They didn't like what she was talking about, so they relocated her and her family, or something happened where her family was replaced with this English family somehow. That's really the only thing I can think of when it comes to the Tanya situation. But we'll get back to this later. We're gonna talk about some of the government's involvement and whatnot here in a bit. So after a few minutes, the rest of the kids make it to the landing site, right? And they find kind of where this thing has landed, and they know that because there's a circle on the ground, perfect circle on the ground. So the way that they described it was a big round patch of flattened yellow, almost burnt looking grass that was in a wild swirly pattern. So before the craft even landed in the Grange, there was a man named Victor who claimed that the two objects landed in an open patch of grass not far from the Grange.
Tanya wasn't the only person who saw the craft on the ground. Before they headed over to the Grange, Victor Zakruzny says 2 objects landed in a grassy paddock where a street is now.
All the kids were hanging on the fence there. There's quite a few kids there. It's a high fence, and I got up to the top there, and all you could see is 2 discs, one there and one bit further away, probably 3 metres apart. I could hear somebody in the background saying, "Stay away, don't jump the fence," and so I thought, "Bugger, I'm going over the fence." The craft probably would have been about there, and there was another one set back a bit on an angle, probably just about there. There's a few kids walking around there, and I was the only one on this side. I got up to it to want to touch it, and it was, well, you could feel heat about 1 metre away coming from. It was pretty warm or hot, and within a minute or so, it just, both of them just lifted up at the same time, about this height. And I see what, that was breathtaking watching that. And then it just gradually lifted up, and then went off towards the pines. I did a rough sketch of it.
Wow, look at that. This is the view from underneath.
That's underneath. There's no seams, no joints, it's just smooth metal. Normally an aircraft has sheet metal, pipe rivets, or all that sort of stuff there. This looked like come out of a mould or something like that, all one smooth piece of metal. It was just incredible. It's just something like you see in the movies.
So I'll put up a photo of a sketch that I think he drew or someone drew representing kind of what he saw that day. So one of the teacher's assistants at the time, while this is going on, was told, because they're trying to chill all the kids out, because the kids are freaking out at this point. So they get after the assembly, they get all the kids in their separate classrooms, and one of the teachers is assigned to walk up and down the hallways to kind of make sure the kids aren't out in the halls going crazy, whatever. So as he's pacing up and down the hallways, he remembers seeing, so you remember the teacher earlier I told you about, Miss Roberts, who was taking photos of the UFO with her camera, right? So this guy, he sees the principal talking to Miss Roberts and another man there as well who he had never seen before in what he described as a strange uniform. The man in the uniform is demanding that Miss Roberts give her the camera with the film in it.
I was prepped to tell the students that what they'd seen didn't exist. We weren't allowed to leave the school, at least I wasn't. My job was to walk up and down the corridors and make sure that all students were in their rooms. I was walking back from the West End. There was a confrontation between Mr. Sambleby, Barbara Robbins, and a man I'd never seen before. I thought it was a police uniform, but it was just dark blue. It was demanded that she hand over not the film, but the entire camera.
Not only just the film. He doesn't just want to take the film or even just look at the film. He wants to take her camera and her film away from her for evidence or whatever, whoever this guy works for. He never claimed who he worked for. He just said that she needed to give him that. And the principal was for some reason taking this guy's side and saying maybe he knew something, maybe they told him something or made him go along with this for some reason. But the principal was also yelling at this woman, telling her, you need to give the camera to the guy. So she eventually gives in, gives the camera to the guy with all the film in it, which I guess you could say is suspicious in that that would be evidence that we don't have now. So, you know, you could say, oh, well, how convenient that camera, it just happens to be gone. And you'd be right. I mean, that is kind of suspicious that the only film evidence or photographic evidence of what happened that day is just happened to get taken away. But that's the way it would be. I mean, if they were trying to cover something up, they would try to make sure that all the photographic evidence would be erased. So it's around this time, after everything's going on, tons of police started to show up. Not only was it the police, the media showed up, all the news stations, and the police were trying to keep the news people away from the school, because the news people are trying to interview these kids or get interviews from the teachers and the kids. And the principal forbid any of the students to talk to any of the news crews on school grounds. So none of them were allowed to talk to any of the news crews if they were anywhere near the school, essentially. So just after school ended, there was a news crew waiting for some of the kids just off of school property.
I was interviewed by Channel 9 and out the front of the school, and a man walked up to me. He was in blue, so he may have been Air Force or perhaps police, I'm not sure. Put his hand on my shoulder and told me to stop talking and go back into the school, and then turned around to the the cameraman and the reporter and told them both to go away. But previous to that happening, not long after the sighting, the army arrived opposite the school in 3 Jeeps and jumped out of the back, and they were in camouflage gear and all that sort of stuff. So they were sort of out the school for quite a while, and I got detention because I had been interviewed by Channel 9.
They got in big trouble for talking to the news stations, for talking to the newspaper, and a lot of them said it was worth it. So this is another crazy twist. A few years ago, a documentary filmmaker doing a documentary about this case, it's actually called Westall 66. You can look it up on YouTube even, I think it's on YouTube. I'll post a link down below. He was making a documentary called Westall 66 about what happened. So while he's trying to make this documentary, he wants to find the news coverage for what happened at the school that day. Because obviously the news crews were there. The kids know it, everybody that was there knows it. They definitely took footage of the school and did a whole thing on it. So the guy goes to the news station, and you can find they have a bunch of archive footage there, where you can go back and look at footage from years ago, and they have it all archived, so you can search for a specific day and a specific time or whatever.
I rang Channel 9 first. They searched for a flying saucer story, and there it was. Now all I have to do is find the can with the matching number. But oddly, there was nothing there. I was absolutely devastated, and nobody had any idea where it had gone.
So he's able to find the paperwork for that day, and it even says like Westall, UFO sighting, whatever, on the paperwork. He knows that film exists, but when he goes to the spot, so it's kind of like a library, you have to find the exact spot. And so when he gets there, it's missing. Now, I mean, if you don't think that's suspicious, then come on. To me, that just makes me want to believe the girl getting her camera taken away even more. I mean, how could that vanish? The only people that have access to that are people that work the news station, or people that are making documentaries or get special privileges to go in there and look at certain things in the archive footage. Not just anyone can go in there and steal something. Luckily, the newspaper that posted the story on it still exists, so they were able to find the newspaper article that had the interviews of the kids and all that stuff in it. So that still existed. So we know for a fact that something happened that day, and that there were interviews, and everything that they say happened did happen as far as the news stuff goes and what they claim they saw. They claimed the exact same thing back then as they do now. We can verify that through the newspaper article, at least, even if the news segment is gone. So people at the school that day weren't the only ones that saw this stuff. People from all around the area, like I said, saw the craft and whatnot. People also saw military trucks, all around the school that day and all around Melbourne. So people from the school and outside the school all claimed that these people in these military trucks showed up within a few minutes after the craft left, just super quickly. Not only that, but earlier I didn't mention that the kids and the teachers claimed that when they saw the craft overhead after it had lifted up from the Grange, I believe, they saw aircraft, jets, military aircraft, trying to surround it, trying to capture it somehow. They just couldn't keep up with it. It was moving so fast. And these jets were like, maneuvering all around it, surrounding it, trying to figure something out, but they couldn't get it to land. So they say around 20 men in camo got out of these trucks with no insignia on them, nothing. They were just in camouflage. So these were the people that kind of investigated the areas afterwards. All the areas where people claimed that it had landed, the people in these supposed camo outfits and these military trucks were the ones that were kind of investigating this thing afterwards.
After a while, trucks turned up with, it looked like army trucks.
Right.
And there would have been about 20 guys got out.
About how long after the object had vanished in the trees?
Oh, I think it was only 20 minutes, which is not a long time.
How did you know they were from the army?
Well, they were khaki-coloured trucks, the covered in patches, sort of that they to hide,
Like camouflage?
Camouflage truck, yeah. And it was the long ones that carry quite a few people, and a couple of jeeps.
So a couple of trucks?
Yeah, and
a couple of jeeps?
Yeah.
And about 20 men? In uniforms?
Yeah, yeah.
And the uniforms were what sort of uniforms?
Just khaki-coloured uniforms.
Just khaki?
Yeah.
No other, don't remember any other sort
Not
of...
that I can remember.
Colours or...
No.
Now the interesting thing about this is that there were no deployable military in Melbourne at the time. So it couldn't have been any Australian military.
It's quite evident that there was no deployable troops available in Melbourne at the time. The main units were all logistic, the supply battalions and so forth at places like Broadmeadows. There were lots of citizen military forces, today's equivalent of the Army Reserve, part-time units, but they couldn't have responded so rapidly, and nor could they have responded in such a large number. I've come to the conclusion that the first people to respond to the incident at Westall would have been civilians of some sort, quasi-civilians, probably working for defence, and probably wearing the sort of work dress that civilians working for, say, the Department of Supply, say, the research and development establishments of the period, the sort of work dress that those personnel wore.
But apparently the descriptions of the camo matched U.S. military outfits perfectly. So a lot of people think that maybe these were U.S. military people who were covering for or helping the Australian military out with, research on these things or something. And it just so happens that there were U.S. military and intelligence personnel stationed near that area at the time.
They certainly were not Australian, because Australians were not using camouflage uniforms in those days, in the mid-60s. Nor would they have been British. But the description of the uniforms certainly matches those worn by the United States Air Force in the mid-1960s.
There were American military and intelligence personnel in Australia in 1966 as part of the Vietnam War effort.
So, if it was the U.S. that showed up that day to try to cover up something, what was their reason for doing that? It seems like anytime somebody tries to find anything from that day, they're unable to find anything on the topic, like it's been wiped from existence. So, like, another example of documents going missing is that some investigators they were interested in this topic and wanted to find some government documents, like reports from the government about, because obviously there were military people there, but there were also policemen, all that stuff there that day. So there would have to be some kind of a document that existed saying that this happened, because if all these people reported to it, there would have to be something. And there would have to be a report filed after this incident saying that they saw, something in the sky or whatever it might be, because it could be a national security threat. So they have to have some kind of paperwork on this. And I believe even some of the people had to be a part of filing this form. Maybe the teachers or something were involved somehow in filing this form. Regardless, the files were whenever they looked into the Australian government archives, they were gone. That, just like with the film reel, that exact spot just happened to be gone. There was nothing there. It was just erased from existence once again.
When I checked out the Royal Australian Air Force's list of UFO sightings for 1966, none of these cases were mentioned, though we know they investigated them.
The Westall case, given that there seemed to be literally at least hundreds of people involved with it that had media attention at the time, there appeared to be evidence that there was a military investigation at the time. There was no Westall file.
But the net result is we found nothing in this mammoth volume of government documentation which would even begin to be a hint that there was something about Westall in the government files.
Not only that, but not a single person from the police or the government, of the Australian government, came forward and said that they were there that day or that they were involved in any way. Not a single person claimed that they were there that day. Why? What's the benefit of that? Why would you? I mean, I guess if you want to just exclude yourself from the whole thing and not want to be associated with that, maybe. But why would you not say, oh yeah, we were there, you know, it was nothing, it was a weather balloon, or oh, it was whatever. I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense that they would try to keep their being there a secret. But maybe I don't know something that they do, and maybe there's a reason they're trying to keep all this secret, and it needs to happen. So after the thing had landed, a couple of the kids had snuck into the Grange and were they wanted to see this spot on the ground that everybody was talking about. So they're kind of sneaking through the woods, and when they get to the spot where it had landed, they're kind of watching from a distance, and the whole area had been cleared at this point. You know, nobody was allowed near it. These kids just happened to have snuck through the woods to get there, but no one was supposed to be in there at the time.
Les Medju went to the Grange with his younger sister, but they saw what seemed to be a different unit.
We hid behind this tree, but fortunately this tree, the branches came down to the ground. Here we are, crouched down on our knees, and we can only look every so often as this tractor came around. He was on guard duty. This was a farmer who's decided to help out. We observed 2 army trucks, 2 men in the camouflage, and 2 men in blue uniforms.
We better cover this area.
And it appeared that a soldier was using a metal mine detector. He's walking around, sweeping back and forth.
Keep down. They'll see
The
us.
next time I see them, they turned and they started kicking violently at the ground. The 2 officers decide then, time to come back. They come back to the truck and they were gone, and then we could enter the paddock.
Les.
We had no idea what we'd all walked into. We didn't know what those army men were doing, and all I can say, it was just, what is this? To have the army there and all the rest of it, it was something important.
Now the crazy thing is, these students, they didn't know, they just knew that there had been a UFO that landed there and that there was some kind of, you know, landing spot on the ground, but they didn't know exactly how it was supposed to look. So when they got there, they described it the exact same way that all the other students had described it as, or anybody else that had seen it described it as. So another witness named Kevin Hurley, who saw the circles on the ground at the Grange when it happened, went back the next day to have another look at the spot. He gets there, I think he's with some people, with some friends. He shows up and he wants to go and see the spot the next day. I guess he was telling his friends about it. He wanted to show it to them, I'm not sure.
Kevin Hurley saw the circles at the Grange on the day of the sighting and went back the next day for another look.
Then when we came to the area where we'd gone through the paddock,
yes,
there was the Air Force of the Army, a whole group of them there, stopping us from going through into the paddock. Don't come near this in this area, and we just headed off back home.
And did they give you any reason
No.
why you couldn't come through?
No, there were vehicles on the paddock, and they had some sort of instrument which at the time I thought looked like Geiger counters. The strong memory I've got is what happened after that. About a week later, I decided to go back again to have another look. As soon as we got down to where the paddock started, all the grass had been cut, which was quite disturbing.
Wow.
So then we walked through that area to where the circles were, and when we got into the area where the circles were previously, the whole area had been burnt, destroying all evidence.
You asked me whether an R&D establishment would destroy evidence. Yes, of course they would.
So, flashback to the school. After the encounter was over, the principal of the primary school called the kids into the gym for an assembly, right? This is where it really starts to kind of go into a whole different set of questions about this whole situation.
And then we had a special assembly. We were all called to a special assembly and told that we hadn't seen anything. It was a weather balloon. We're all massively hysterical. Don't talk about it. If you talk about it, you'll get into trouble.
So they bring in these 5 guys in these blue suits, apparently, these weird blue uniforms or suits. I'm not sure exactly what they looked like. Similar to the one that took the girl's camera, similar to the ones that got out of the truck. But they come into this assembly and they start telling the kids that this was some kind of experiment, and they just don't want people knowing about it.
And you know, they just sort of said, oh, well, what you saw was sort of an experimental thing, and you know, we just don't want anyone talking about it or it going any further. So
How many people were there that came, and do you remember?
I think there was 5.
And did they explain where they were from, who they were?
No, not really. Just a couple of the teachers said afterwards they're from one of these experimental mobs to do with the armed forces and stuff like that, and that was sort of the end of it.
So at first I kind of thought this was silly, because I was like, why would this be an experiment? It doesn't really make sense that it would be an experiment. But then I started thinking about how quickly those planes got there to start surrounding these crafts in the sky. And I was thinking, like, if they knew that quickly that there was something happening, or a spacecraft, you know, like almost immediately, like within a couple minutes, they were able to scramble jets and get them to the spot that quickly, then they must have known something was going on, or they must have picked it up a long time before, and they had a lot of time to get them there. Now, you know, a lot of people did claim that they saw those things all throughout that day, so maybe they had just gotten reports earlier and they sent the planes and they just happened to catch it when it had come up from the Grange. I'm not sure, but it seems suspicious to me that they got there that quick, and that makes me think that they must have been known about it somehow. Also, like how quickly these guys in suits showed up afterwards. Apparently it was just a couple minutes afterwards, these people in these weird uniforms and these suits showed up, and the military people started showing up just a few minutes after the sightings took place. So to me, that's suspicious. Now, the problem I have with that theory is, why would they land these things at a school in public like that? What's the benefit of landing it in public when you could land it in, you know, if you're gonna do these experiments with a craft like this, a super advanced craft that you don't want the technology getting out of, why are you doing it in the middle of a big city in Australia, landing it in the back of a school, or like the side of a school? That makes no sense. If anything, they would do it in some private field off in the middle of nowhere where no one, I mean, Australia's a huge place. There are places where nobody lives in the middle of Australia that they could easily do these experiments and get away with them and nobody would know. So why are they doing them in the middle of Melbourne, landing them in a school? There's no way that this was an experiment, in my opinion. There's no way that they can't be this stupid. Also, like the people, but it is weird that the people showed up so quickly. They just must have known about this thing for a while before they showed up. But there's really no way to know for sure. They even tried to pull the same trick that the American government pulled with Roswell, which was to say that it was a weather balloon.
Perhaps it was a weather balloon or some other sort of aircraft and not necessarily a UFO.
No, definitely UFO. I'd never seen anything like it before, and we were used to seeing aircraft because we weren't that far away from Moorabbin Airport. So we would quite often see the little planes fly around. So was nothing like I've ever seen ever since either.
Which, if you've ever seen a weather balloon, it doesn't look like a UFO at all. I'll post some photos of it right now. It doesn't look like a UFO at all. So not only was the principal claiming it was a weather balloon, but the government was as well afterwards. And there was even papers and articles written about this, claiming that it was debunked because it definitely had to have been a weather balloon. And even in some of these articles, they basically say, oh yeah, well there was some weather balloons around that area at the time, so this whole thing is debunked. It had to have been one of those. It's like, no, there's no way. The way that the teacher was describing how quickly these things were moving, a weather balloon doesn't look like a saucer. I think kids would know the difference between a weather balloon and a saucer. A weather balloon is shaped like a big circle balloon in the sky. A saucer is shaped like a saucer. It's not. There's nothing similar between the two whatsoever. Not to mention how they describe the craft moving, flying, all that stuff. I think people are smart enough to know the difference in a weather balloon and a spacecraft. I mean, come on, that's insane. And this guy in the article was so smug and came across like, oh, I can't believe these idiot kids and teachers would believe something so stupid. I'll post the article in the description below and you guys can check it out if you want. So it's really very frustrating that he seems so certain that he has debunked it when really he's delivered no evidence except that there were some weather balloons in Melbourne around that, like in that year. But yeah, he delivers it in a way where he acts like he's so sure, and the government uses that paper and other weird justifications to say, oh yeah, it was just a weather balloon. But that's not what anybody that was there describes it as. So, I don't know. I think it's kind of suspicious that they try to use the exact same story for this case as they did for Roswell, when the Roswell one obviously was extremely unconvincing. Nobody believed that what crashed in Roswell was a weather balloon. So the question becomes, who are these people that showed up? Who are these people in these unmarked outfits with no insignia on them? Who are these people in the suits or the uniforms that showed up? Who are these people taking the cameras? Because the Australian government says it wasn't them. The police say it wasn't them. Who was it? I mean, was it the Men in Black, which are kind of like, you know, not the movie, but they're kind of like these people who are supposed to show up. I think I told you guys about this in a previous video, where they're like these people that are supposed to show up in suits that are very creepy, and some people think they're aliens, but I think that's kind of ridiculous. I think they're just like, maybe they are, but I think they're just like humans that work for the government that are trying to keep something a secret or whatever, that don't want us to know about certain things and want people to keep their mouths shut. I think that's way more likely to be the case. But it is weird that these people just happen to show up after all these crazy abduction stories or events or whatever and try to get people to be quiet. So maybe it's the Men in Black, I don't know. Maybe it's just some agency trying to keep us quiet, I don't know. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below, like, do you guys think these are Men in Black? Do you guys think these are working for some private militia? You think that's more likely? I want to know you guys' opinions, because I honestly don't have an answer when it comes to this. This is one of the bigger mysteries of this, and when it comes to this part of the story and them trying to keep this quiet, it makes you wonder, you know, with the burning of the grass, with the military trucks everywhere, with the girl who goes missing, Tanya. What happened with her? You know, were they that obsessed with keeping this a secret that they would go and replace some girl's entire family and relocate her somewhere else, or do something with, nobody knows where she is? I mean, that's really weird. That is extremely suspicious to me. I think we need to start a campaign called Where is Tanya? We need to get it trending on Twitter. We need to figure out where she is, what happened. I mean, maybe she is living some private life somewhere and she just didn't want to ever talk about this again. She wanted to get out of there, but it doesn't explain the other family living there the next day. What is it? There's no way they could have sold their house and moved everything the next day. What is that about? That makes no sense. And this is someone who was a trusted friend of hers who had been there multiple times. So it makes no sense. Like, this wasn't just some random person that went there and the family said that they didn't know her or that she didn't live there anymore. Also, on top of that, Mr. Greenwood, who was the science teacher, he used to speak for like, you know, a little, maybe a year or two after this happened, within that year or two, he used to speak publicly about this. You know, he talked to the newspaper when it happened. He claims two officers, as he described them, showed up at his house and began to tell him, oh, he couldn't have seen a flying saucer because flying saucers don't exist. They started to belittle him. And then they told him that if he talked about this to anyone again, they would tell everyone that he was an alcoholic and ruin his reputation. Because he was a young teacher at the time, and he couldn't have like everybody thinking he was an alcoholic, because he would lose his job. Back then, especially, you know, it was very frowned upon. He didn't want to lose his job. He wasn't even an alcoholic either. He was just a normal guy, but they were threatening to ruin his reputation just in order to keep him quiet. And that's why he doesn't speak publicly about this anymore.
The authorities had found a way to silence the children, but they still had unfinished business with the teacher, Andrew Greenwood. He told me that two officers came to his home and threatened him under the Official Secrets Act. They said that he couldn't have seen a flying saucer at Westall because there were no such things as flying saucers. They threatened to tell people he was alcoholic, even though he wasn't. As a first-year teacher with a career ahead of him, he couldn't take the risk of speaking out.
It's sad because he would be such a good voice to have on this. You know, one of the teachers that saw everything, to be able to come forward and talk about this. But now he feels like he can't talk about it anymore. Maybe as he gets older, since he's like much older, I don't know if he's alive or dead now, but since he's much older, maybe he has less to lose and he feels like he can come forward. But you know, maybe he has kids or grandkids and he doesn't want something to happen to them and he's going to keep it a secret. So I honestly don't know what's going to happen with that. But I think with that, mixed with the Tanya stuff, mixed with the burning, mixed with all the military stuff, them taking the camera, all that really makes me wonder if there really is something big that they're trying to hide here. I can't help but think that there is. over 200 people saw these things that day. That's not a small amount. As far as UFO stories go and UFO sightings go, I think this is the most credible one. There are more people that saw this one than any other one, besides, like, you know, the Phoenix lights and stuff like that. But that wasn't as huge as this one. Actually, it was bigger as far as more people saw it, but I don't think it was as interesting as this one, in my opinion. Mostly because people just saw it in that one. It was just people seeing a triangle of lights in the sky, and it looked like a big triangle craft hovering over the city, and then it was gone. But nothing, it didn't land or anything like that like this one did, and there wasn't all the people trying to keep it quiet, or as far as I know, there wasn't like there is with this one. But the Tanya thing just really pushes it over the ledge for me. I mean, what happened to her? What happened to her family? I would kill to have those answers. But yeah, so that's about it. It's starting to get dark, so I need to wrap this video up. Let me know what you guys think about this video. Did you enjoy it? Do you want me to do more UFO videos? Do you want me to stop? Do you want me to do some other stuff? I'm definitely gonna make a video about, like, you know, daily life in New York kind of thing. But I want to try to explore some other things as well. If you guys have any suggestions, please let me know. I love making these videos for you guys. I have a blast. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm enjoying all the people that are supporting me and trying to, you know, encourage me to keep going through this and not give up, because it's hard, you know, when you're small, you know, you're not really getting the views or the, you know, growth on your channel that you want. So, you know, you have to kind of persevere through that and keep making stuff, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. And you guys are really helping me want to keep doing that, and I appreciate that so much. So please, you know, keep liking the videos, keep commenting, subscribe if you haven't already. Please, that means so much to me. You know, if I want this channel to grow, we have to keep getting those likes, we have to keep getting those comments, the subscriptions. My goal is to try and get this channel to 100 subscribers by the end of April. I mean, it'd be awesome if I could have more, but I think 100 is fair. If I can just get 100 by the end of April, I will be happy. So please send this video to your friends, share with people. You guys have done such a great job with that already. Please, you know, keep getting it out there. Yeah, I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you want, what kind of new videos you want down below. Oh yeah, do something nice for someone today, because you should, and it'll make them happy, and they might make someone else happy because you made them happy. So yeah, go make someone smile, go make someone happy today, and have a great rest of your night or day or whatever time it is where you're watching this. A new video coming out soon, I promise you. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day, night, wherever you are. Enjoy it. Goodbye.
All I knew was what I saw, and it definitely was not any aircraft of the day by any stretch of the imagination, and it certainly was not a weather balloon.
It still would take me to my grave. What the hell was that?
It was amazing, and something that, you know, I've never forgotten. But you just sort of had it stored in the back of your mind, because a lot of people are sceptical.
The fact that they can travel so fast and that they've been spotted all over the world, landings and very similar stories of these patches of flattened grass or burnt grass. I personally believe that there is something going on somewhere else.